Thank you all for joining the session this morning. This is supporting young women in manufacturing as part of IWIN, the Illinois Work-Based Learning Innovation Network. I'm Heather Penzak, Director of Innovation and Implementation with EdSystems, fitting title for this network, but just really excited to gather you all today and again, really discuss what it looks like, what questions we have, what we're hearing from young women, what are all those things that help support young women to pursue experiences in manufacturing. So what does the recruitment look like, the engagement look like, the social capital built look like, all of those different pieces that we really think about. How do we get a young woman excited about manufacturing when typically, if you would think about this as like a non-traditional pathway for women, right, we're not seeing that representation. If you all think about your manufacturing employers in your regions, I'm making an assumption, but I would assume as you walk into those places, you don't see, even 50-50 women, right? Although we do have some organizations that actually are very strongly women and female owned and all these pieces, right? But it continues to be a growing area, a space where we really need to be intentional about our practices and how we're really engaging young women, even from an early phase, right? We do work with Illinois Manufacturers Association and even this rebranding of how we think about a manufacturer as a maker. I can think about my own daughter who's 5 years old right now and loves to make. It's like one of her favorite things to do is to just make stuff, right? And so how we're really centering and building on that excitement, that creativity, and what it means to be a maker, and then all the things that are manufactured that we don't even think about is a really, really great way to just talk to young women at all ages, right, about what that means. But I'm going to give just a little bit of an intro here, some context setting, and then turn it to some communities here to share. But as always, would love to know who's here today. And as we think about our presenters, our communities who are going to share, if there's questions that you have about, what it means to support young women, questions that you've been grappling with, how do you get them excited about manufacturing? What do you do for X? Please put those in the chat. But would also love, if you've been to an IWIN before, I think a lot of folks on here have, it really is a space for us all to share, even beyond those who are formally presenting. And so if you have insights, resources, ways that you've really been intentional and thoughtful and found success, or maybe even you're trying out and haven't quite, classified it as quote unquote success yet, but you're trying it out, it's feeling like a good move. Would love to know about that in the chat too. And we will, again, very much want to have this as a discussion space. So each community will be sharing. Please use that chat to put in comments or questions as they're sharing. But after each person shares, we'll also definitely have time to, go off mute and ask questions as well. And, presenters too, if they see your questions in the chat, may stop and respond to those in real time as well too. Wonderful. Hello, Bethany. Again, folks, please keep introducing yourself in there and questions, insights, resources that you have all centered around supporting young women. But if this is your first time or kind of newer still to IWIN and who we are, we really are this innovation network, right? So what we do a lot of is highlighting and exploring those innovative models for work-based learning. So here again, really thinking about being innovative and supporting young women and being really targeted and intentional about that. But we engage a lot, in conversations, and this is one of those, right? What does it mean to really build high quality experiences that are providing more equitable access, thinking about social capital? We have a lot of focus when we look at our Black and Latinx students and where they need that access and opportunity to build social capital, but really thinking here too, in this one about women, but also, young women, women of color, like how are we really thinking about those women and building those experiences for them? A lot of what this is, though, my favorite part is building connections. So as you all are sharing in the chat here, I love hearing about you all and sharing about Dawn. Like I see your tours that you all do and introducing yourselves. It really is a great opportunity, as you can see in the chat. And if you started to chart out a map of where everybody's coming from, it's all across Illinois. So it's a really, really cool way in this network to build connections among communities that might never necessarily interact with each other, except for maybe a couple times a year at a conference that takes a lot of travel and costs and all that stuff. And I'm starting to ramble here, but it really is a cool space for that. And then also thinking about too, where there's policy changes, support systems, ways that can be flagged and brought up and bubble to the top within this network is also a really valuable thing for this group. So there is a link here. I'll put the link to the presentation here again, because you'll see some different links popping up, but there's a resource hub. Please go and explore that, utilize, adapt, repurpose it. lots of different like resources from every community. If they share everything. And we have a newsletter as well. So not sure how you heard about this opportunity, but if you subscribe to that newsletter, you'll always stay in the loop on things coming up through IWIN. We look across the whole work-based learning continuum. So, our conversation today is across the continuum, right? You're going to hear about some career exploration models. You're going to learn about, opportunities and how young women are feeling about the manufacturing pathway and their experiences. But these learnings can be applied across this entire continuum, right? But I know a lot of the area when we think about this is within that career awareness or career exploration. How do we get that initial spark going? But we should be thinking across the whole continuum where those young women are supported and engaged throughout. And so this is, this conversation is not a new one. People have been thinking about supporting young women in manufacturing, getting more females into their programs for a while. But this real kind of piece here has come out a lot through STAMP. And so STAMP is the Scaling Transformative Advanced Manufacturing Pathways. And so EdSystems is working in close partnership with the Illinois Manufacturers Association and supporting communities across the state who are really thinking intentionally about their manufacturing pathways. So with the goals here, you can see within STAMP, and there's a link at the bottom too if you want to dig in on more information there. But it's really thinking about increasing that secondary enrollment in manufacturing pathways. Specifically, you can see those underrepresented students. So women as being one of those key populations for that. Increasing dual credit offerings, increasing the number of students who complete and then earn that college and career pathway endorsement, and also those relevant high value industry credentials. And then ultimately, right, increasing that matriculation into post-secondary programs and then into the workforce. So everything is a pathway kind of building on each other. So a lot of what you're hearing today is coming out of these communities and these really intentional efforts across the state to scale and enhance those manufacturing pathways and experiences for young people. Specifically in terms of work-based learning and the STAMP initiative, communities, so within STAMP and even beyond STAMP, are sharing resources, and we continue to build out a work-based learning continuum in manufacturing. So if you click on that link there, it'll take you and give you examples and videos and resources and templates and whole spelled out models, internship frameworks for a work-based learning continuum in manufacturing. We're also working with Practera. It's an experiential learning platform, and we're developing virtual work-based learning templates in manufacturing. And there's a lot of people who are like, skeptical, virtual work-based learning in manufacturing. But, we're going to have them in career exploration. So students can go through modules and engage with a mentor about different roles and occupations within manufacturing, but also developing templates for team-based challenges and also 30-hour kind of micro internship, those career development experiences, which will be inspired by, I see some GCamp people on here today, the quote to production. So how does a young person go through the quote to production process, and also a problem-based in the supply chain disruption. So how do they manage, how would they address the supply chain disruption? These are very real problems that manufacturers grapple with. So we're finalizing those. They're going to be piloted by STAMP communities in this next school year, but then those will be shared broadly statewide afterwards. We're also working in partnership, I mentioned before, the Illinois Manufacturers Association, and we're engaging with their foundation boards. We're actually going to be meeting with their human resources, their HR group soon, and we've developed an employer training advisory group. And so that one is really getting intentional about resources and guidance that are employer facing, but at the same time, we'll have language too for schools and communities as you're working with employers about what it means to host high school interns. We're especially really digging in on this effort for that under 18 component, which we know is a big question, a big need from communities. And some have really worked with some employers to navigate that under 18 piece for internships. Others are still kind of grappling with the language and resources needed for that. So this is very much kind of a weedy group digging in on those pieces. And the goal there is to really share that by the late summer or fall 2023. Just kind of continues to be the information we're getting, the people we're able to gather. And as you all know, scheduling and timing for all those things. But we also recently developed a toolkit. So Danya is here on the line. They're going to speak to that. They've been having conversations with communities across the state, looking into best practices, research, and they'll share more about that today, but we're going to preview it for you all. And so today's conversation, I'm gonna kick it over here to Angela in just a moment about their career exploration models for really empowering and engaging young women within that kind of earlier part of the continuum, looking at both their manufacturing and their skilled trades pathways. We have one of our other STEM communities here too from the Sauk Valley Community College area, and they'll kind of speak more about that, where they actually did empathy interviews. This is a expectation of communities as part of the STAMP grant to do empathy interviews with their targeted students, right? What is their equity challenge? Who are the students they're having kind of the most difficulty they feel like serving and really seeing the results of? And so this community really said that females, our young women, is who we want to target for that and understand more about their experience. So they'll share that. And then, like I mentioned before, we'll do an overview of that STAMP toolkit, the resources and guidance for what it means, what it can look like, right, to support young women in manufacturing. Nothing is exhaustive or the 100% answer, right? But we're hopeful that all these things here today help guide your conversations, inspire some thinking, and again, would very much want to engage in dialogue and questions here. So please feel free to keep adding those to the chat. But with that, I'm going to turn over here to Angela to introduce themselves and talk about their career exploration efforts.
So good morning, everyone. How exciting. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, Heather, for inviting me. I am Angela Acevedo, and I am the work-based learning specialist at Chicago Public Schools. And my cluster is construction, architecture, manufacturing, pre-engineering, and transportation, all of those fun pathways. And so if we could go to the next slide, Heather. We had many exciting events this year to expose our girls to the exciting world of manufacturing and the trades. One of them that comes to mind is the Women in Manufacturing Engineering Expo. And this event was in partnership with City Colleges of Chicago. And so the target audience are our middle school girls, right? Let's get them engaged early on, and our high school students. And this day was just a very exciting day packed with hands-on activities. We also provided our students with a tour of City Colleges of Chicago. They have an amazing manufacturing wing, which is a very new space. They have a few makerspace rooms in that area. And so our students had a chance to, get involved in hands-on activities and learn about our makerspace and all the different equipment and so forth, so on. They also had, towards the end of the event, an opportunity to engage with our companies and learn about career opportunities and apprenticeship opportunities. And that was probably one of the most exciting times for our girls to get to learn about that. Next slide, please. And so another event this event I spearheaded, and again, I was just very intentional. I really wanted to make sure that I engaged our freshmen and sophomores in this event. And it was it was a half-day event. It was the first time that we had actually hosted this at one of our high schools. And we opened it up with presentations from our guest speakers. So again, being very intentional, bringing in professionals that look like our girls, right? And that are in the field of construction and manufacturing. And it was an hour long. We had about an hour dedicated just for presentations, which was really great. There was one presenter that was just like phenomenal. She was in her early 20s and just fired the girls up about, how great the experience has been for her. But she also talked about her challenges, right? Working in a mostly male-dominated world, right? And space. And so we had just very transparent conversations about that. And, but she also shared, the great side of things too, right? This could be a very lucrative career. You are going to have opportunities to grow, especially like if you're in an apprenticeship program. And she also talked about the support systems in place that she has to help her, right, in the space. So we had an hour long of guest speakers. After the presentations, we had a hands-on activity, and I don't know if we have pictures here, Heather, of the girls engaging with our guest speakers. So here we go. So what we did was we partnered our guest speakers with a team of girls, right, with different teams. And the students worked on putting a house together, right, building a house out of popsicle sticks. It may sound pretty cheesy, but let me tell you, it was such a cool project because we asked our girls to assign a team member, right, for their team. So they had a project manager, they had an architect, there were all these different roles that they had. And so we also asked them to think about, what are those elements of this house that would be helpful for our environment in the future. If you were to build your dream home, what would it have? What safety features would it have? Think about building supplies, right? As we're talking about manufacturing, it's not just the wood, but what about the equipment, the tools? What will you do differently? So just have them, they just had a ton of ideas. It was such a great opportunity. It was about an hour and a half long, and they came up with some really cool designs and some really great ideas, right? Again, I'm just thinking about what can we do differently in the future in terms of materials? What do we do? How do we pivot when we're in short supply? And we all know how that looked like during COVID, right? So it was just a really great project. At the end of the competition, I wish I could have awarded them all. That's the worst part of competitions for me, right? You got to pick a winning team. you want them all to win, right? And they did, quite honestly, they really did. As part of the winning team, they also had a chance to present on their presentation. And that was really interesting to me because I remember at that age being so timid about presentations. I will tell you, they all wanted to present, but they wanted to present really because they were so proud of what they came up with. They felt so empowered by being paired up with our guest speakers, right? And so they had a chance to present, and then they were awarded at the end with a gift card. But again, just a really great opportunity. At Chicago Vocational Academy High School, that's where we had the event. Really, the goal is to get our girls excited about manufacturing, get them excited about the trades. And so a lot of the students were very inspired, right? And were motivated to at least give it a try. And so we hope to have a lot more of these types of events available for our students in the future. We talked a lot about challenges towards the end. We really wanted our teams to think about what are those challenges that you experience as working as part of the team, right? What came up and how did you solve those issues? Again, just a very well-rounded project, team-based challenge. And they also had a chance to ask their mentors, which were our guest speakers, about how they, as professionals, respond to and handle those type of challenges. So it's just great experience. And at the end of the day, our professionals exchange information with our students. And that's also something that you just want to keep in mind, right? Is how do we connect our professionals and keep them connected with our students too throughout their journey. And so it was a plus. It was a great event. And I like to post everything on LinkedIn. It's just great to get other companies excited about what we do as well.
Thank you so much, Angie, and open up to you here if you all have any questions, but very much agree about your LinkedIn piece. I feel like I'm always like, Angie, what's this cool thing you did? What's this? What's that? What's that thing? And they're like, oh, just go check the link. I'm like, right. Yeah. Okay. Look into it. But I just appreciate your, and it's something that we had kind of thought about a lot and heard from a lot of communities is that intentionality to the best of your ability to have that representation, right, within the spaces and to have a safe space where you can have an open, frank conversation about things that are going well as a female in manufacturing, things that have been a struggle, have been a challenge, right? And how they've navigated that. And, sometimes they haven't fully navigated it, right? They're still navigating it. And that's just like the real piece of it all. But creating that safe space for dialogue is just incredible. So appreciate all of your work there. I'm curious if there's any questions. I don't see any in the chat right now, but feel free to go off mute if you have any questions for Angie and their team too. And I will say too, because I know they have to hop off, but they did save their email there. So if you want to follow up at any time, they're very open to connect. All right. Well, Angie, thank you again so much for sharing today. I will keep you posted too as questions might come up, but please do feel free to reach out. She's incredible and does a lot of wonderful things for students. So thank you. With that here, I'm going to turn to Heather and Janice. I'm not speaking in the third person. There is another Heather here who are going to share about their empathy interviews and the things that they're hearing from students. So I'll give you all a chance to introduce yourselves and then I can move to the next slide as you're ready.
Good morning. So I'm Heather Waniger. I work for ROE 47 in conjunction with Sauk Valley Community College. Janice Jones is Sauk Valley Community College. I'll let her introduce, but she is also in the car. So if she's a little cut out, we know why.
Please forgive my less than professional presentation status today, but really excited to share about some of the things we learned. And I just like to say, we do not have all the answers. We have perhaps even more questions. And that's part of the progression. But I'm the college and career readiness facilitator at Sauk Valley Community College.
So we had the opportunity through STAMP to do some empathy interviews. We are working currently with 5 local high school districts, and then Janice works at the community college. And so we were able to partner with those schools and do some empathy interviews with young ladies in the industrial arts categories of their schools. We are up in rural Illinois, so most of our school districts have under 1,000 students. And so we had the opportunity to really kind of talk with girls in those areas. And so some of the things that came out of those conversations were really interesting. I think Janice and I both went into those empathy interviews thinking we were going to hear one thing, and some of it was confirmed and some of it we kind of knew. And then some of it was really interesting to hear how women are getting involved into manufacturing, how women are starting to hear, and then also some vocalization about, hey, this hasn't worked, or I wish this would have happened in my high school. And then also even at the college level, how a lot of those women got involved. So one thing that we did, one of the major takeaways that we noticed as we were speaking to young women in the high schools was a lot of them had connection to the pathway outside of the school. A lot of the girls that I spoke with said that they were family members had been a part of the manufacturing world, whether it was parents, dads, uncles, even a few mothers, but there was family or there was a connection to the ag community. So they were working out on the fields, they were out in tractors, that early ag piece. We know ag has this great, robust system and systems in place, even starting so early in that career exploration, which is a huge takeaway. Listening to other presenters and doing this work for a while now, we know the sooner we start getting students engaged, helping them explore careers, the better. And so we know ag has that kind of already built into the schools. So a lot of the students said, because of the career exploration through the ag pathway or through ag classes, it motivated them to do welding, motivated them to be a part of that. So a lot of it was based off of outside connections, and then motivating them to feel confident to take those coursework and to take that class inside the high school. We did also notice that a lot of the students felt like had they not had that outside push to take an industrial arts course that they wouldn't have. I sat down in a group with young ladies at one of our local high schools, and they said, when counselors are going over coursework and they're going over picking classes, it's kind of like, oh yeah, these are your industrial arts classes. They're open to take them. Nobody tells them they can't, nobody tells them they shouldn't, but they also don't really say, hey, look at this. Let me really tell you what's happening in this class to even spark their interest. It's kind of like, oh yeah, it's available. And if I bring it up and I say I'm interested, they're supportive, but they're also not saying more about that class. But they did say, but it came to college bound classes, or it came to some of the other extracurricular activities or classes that weren't necessarily mandatory. They talked to me a little bit more about those. And so they said it was kind of that unspoken kind of bias that, nobody was intending to not gear them towards or having the opportunity for them to take industrial arts classes, but they weren't also giving it the full attention that they might have to other courseworks. So there were a few girls that kind of noticed and realized and recognized that was happening, probably very unintentional. The other thing with instructors, we noticed the ladies loved their instructors. There was a bond. There was something about anytime I asked them, do you feel like your instructor treats you differently than they treat the gentleman in the class? It was a no. They felt confident. They felt like their instructor heard them. There were some biases with how their peers treated them in that class. They did not feel like when they left the classroom, if they went up to math or went up to Spanish, that those same gentlemen treated them differently in those Spanish courses. But when they were down in the industrial arts classes, they were, oh, let me help you with that. Or they weren't as capable in that particular classroom, when really they were fine. They were doing well. But the instructor relationship from the young ladies' perspectives to their instructors were phenomenal. Most of our buildings do have male instructors. We do have 2 buildings though that do have female instructors. So there was that instructor relationship that some of the women did get to see somebody that looked like them as their instructor, and some of them did not. But that relationship from the student to the instructor was still very positive.
And Heather, let me add there. I think as we move along that continuum into the college realm, I saw some of the same things, right? I will say that my college students I interviewed got into this manufacturing area almost by default, right? Somebody said, oh, I was on a FaceTime call decorating a cake, and a friend of mine said, hey, have you considered welding? Because it's the same thing you're doing right there with that cake. Or a friend said, hey, I want to take a welding class. You want to take one with me? Just really random. I did not interview anyone who had any kind of high school manufacturing experience. Now, we have a few of those, but most of them, that was not the trajectory that I saw. And in the same vein, all of the women that I interviewed were very respectful of their instructors and felt like there was no bias shown to them. So that was exciting to hear as a faculty member, college person, but also that there were moments, they felt like they were accepted by their male classmates, but there were moments where there was kind of a swooping in to see if they needed rescuing, and not always appreciated, but sometimes those are the things that I heard. So it didn't seem to change too much as things moved into the college realm.
Damsel in distress type thing that was not necessary, but and some of the dispositions we talked about, especially at the college level, Janice was able to kind of hear from those students that said, coming in and approaching the coursework and coming in and approaching class with the confidence. One of the students voiced the opinion of approaching confidence of a man, that, in those areas, very often men are like, oh, I can do anything. And if I make a mistake, whatever. Sometimes women are a little bit more, let's think of the process and the steps first before we kind of dive in. And she was kind of approaching that idea of thinking, no, like, let's just go. I'm going to have the same confidence. But also then being willing to ask questions and believing in their own abilities. I had one student at the high school level that I spoke with who talked about the beating and talked about how when she was welding, the confidence she had in it, and even the peace and the comfort she had while she welded. And I am a city kid with zero welding knowledge of any kind. And so to hear her have that kind of background and that maturity level of how she felt while she was welding was really cool. It was really neat to hear that. All right, next slide. So one of the things that we talked with the girls about was, how could we engage women? What could we do more to get more young ladies down? I want to say the basement. It's not the greatest thing, but it always feels like that's where the industrial arts classes are, is in the basement at the high school. And so how can we get more women downstairs? How can we get women in these classrooms with you so that you're not so outnumbered? And they really talked about that early career exploration, just as as Angie was talking earlier about focusing on middle school girls or those freshman and sophomore girls. I think that is so very true in all areas of our career exploration, but even in an area as students start picking coursework for their high school, to give them the confidence to say, I can try this. This is a new building, and really letting them know what happens in this class. One of the young ladies I spoke with, she said, I loved building. I was always building as a young girl. I was always tearing things apart and putting it back together, or I was tearing things apart and building something new with it. And I want to open my own business, and I want to make tables for people. But she didn't know how to do that. There was nobody else in her family. There was nobody else that was going to encourage her to take those courses. And so if we have that early career exploration, we're having those conversations in classrooms and saying, I hear you and I see a natural talent you have. Take this class. Let me show you where in the high school this is, and where is that going to build on your natural strengths and the natural things that you like to do. And here's the courses you can take to do that. And the sooner we have those conversations, sometimes a couple of those students, when I ask them, what is their next step? Where are they going? What are they doing post-secondary? Many of them were like, I hate it. I don't want to go post-secondary. I don't want to do, because I don't like school, but I love this classroom. I love this space that I'm in. And so being able to tell those women, there's lots of post-secondary options that let you stay in these types of classrooms, and you don't have to go do the English papers, and you don't have to take the math tests, but you can still stay in the space where you feel confident and where you enjoy being. And so having those kind of conversations and opening that window and that door, that I can be confident in this space, in this area, and I can move on also in my education outside of high school to pursue those careers.
I'm gonna
Yep.
just butt in here. I think for me, this was a huge aha moment, where when I realized these students were tactile learners, and yet we're doing career exploration that is not tactile.
Yeah.
Like, not a best practice, right? One of the young women I interviewed said, we cannot just do a tour of a cool factory or manufacturing facility. That's not enough for me. I need to get my hands on something and do something that reflects what they're doing at that cool factory. And I think so often the mindset in our area has been, if we just get them in to see that the manufacturing world is not the dirty, just line work that it used to be, right? That there are so many options that will move the needle. And I don't think that's enough. And so that was a huge aha moment for me.
think it gives an opportunity for a lot of those stereotypes to be busted. And what does it look like? What does it sound like? All of those things versus what we've built up in our minds, or even what the generations before us have told students, male or female, like, oh, you don't want to go work in these industries. This is not where you want to be. And what it's really like in those spaces, and allowing students to really know what that's like. All right. So kind of what's next after doing these empathy interviews? What did we learn from them? What do we want to do? So hosting, just like it sounds like some of that work's being done. And so bringing that to our local area. We have in a couple of other industries started doing non-attendance day focused kind of career exploration events. And so building on, we currently do have a manufacturing day that is open to our high school students. But we would like to start with an 8th grade girls manufacturing event. Our local community college is super supportive of letting students come on campus and getting their hands on. We have industry partners in the manufacturing world that are all about jumping in and being supportive. They recognize the need and recognize the fact that they have to build their workforce. And the best way to do that is to get them while they're in high school. So we would like to build that current space to allow 8th graders to see themselves in that field and also see like people that look like them. We have several ladies in our area that are welders and working in manufacturing that have been a part of this process a little bit, starting to build those relationships with them and getting them out and getting them in front of students so that just very much like we heard before, letting them have those authentic conversations. And then also just the CTE promotions, providing what does it really look like to sign up for some of these CTE courseworks. We really saw when we spoke with these students, who was really helping you in your career exploration event. I was talking to a senior and I was talking to some sophomores that said, oh, we don't really do career exploration things until our junior and senior year, or we don't really prep for post-secondary until then. And I'm like, no, I don't want to hear that. Like, we want to start that sooner. And the sooner, and then when I asked them who was really helping you in that process, that senior, who helped you in your career exploration, who helped you in that post-secondary planning, they really identified that CTE teacher. They really identified the teacher that was in the building having those close conversations with. And so trying to build that culture inside of our buildings of post-secondary and career exploration. Anybody that's been in the classroom knows sometimes those last 3 minutes of class when we're kind of wrapping things up, that's where you get that authentic conversation. That's where you get that conversation about, oh yeah, I did this last night and it's super fun, and a teacher can make a connection. Have you thought about being so-and-so? Have you thought about taking such and such class? And really expanding what does career exploration look like to the entire staff, not just the counselors, not just your CTE teachers, not just administrators, but your entire building having that. And so being able to support them at 8th grade before they even get into that high school building. Hey, this is your opportunity. These are things that are available for you in the high school and what you can do. So providing that with 8th graders. And then that transition, most students are not in your high school building. And so what does that transition look like, and giving them the confidence as 8th graders coming into the high school to help them make some choices to be a part of those CTE courses in an industrial arts area. All right. I think that's all of our slides.
Yes, and I was going to stop share for a moment as there might be questions or reflections to you from the group. I know something's sitting for me and I don't have an answer, but are those male peers, right? They're classmates, and thinking a lot about, you put your own self in high school and who are some of your biggest influences, right? Like it is your peers, so I think all the efforts to have like instructors and, industry representation that helps them see themselves in that field. But then there is this additional peer component, right? And what does it look like to have them, but are supporting like the females in their classroom, right? And it's just sitting with me a bit here.
I think the stereotype of someone in manufacturing is also something that the women I talked with really felt like they were busting barriers. You know, multiple of my interviews said, my nails are done, my hair is done, my makeup is on. I put on my pink, you know, welding mask and I'm on it. And it doesn't make me less feminine. It doesn't make me less, you know, a woman. And, but this is who I am. And so I think busting those kind of stereotypical barriers are also something that that's important to think about.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
I guess my comment, or great presentation, by the way, really like hearing that. During my time in Peoria, we had a lot of students doing internships at Caterpillar and as well as other manufacturing. And I guess my question for both of you is, have you seen an instance where an individual went into a place where they were the only woman there, and how they kind of went about navigating that? I could tell stories about a young lady that was in Peoria, and she was the only female African-American student in this facility. And, you know, now she's opened the doors for others. So I'm just curious what your take is on that.
That's awesome. I don't think we've had any young women intern quite yet. A lot of them are within their high school buildings. I do know we've partnered with some of our industry partners, and there are a lot of females present, but I do notice a lot of those female presence in our manufacturing days and those kind of things are also in the office, not necessarily down out on the floor or out doing those kinds of things. So it was interesting as the other presenter was talking, I wrote notes down about when we do our manufacturing day, when we had them come out and they were building cars and they were having the hands-on experience, that all of the speakers that were down on stage were they were men. There were women around helping them build the cars, but maybe being a little bit more intentional about having those women come down and speak about what it's like. But yeah, we've really not had that opportunity to see what those high school internships look like for women.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was speaking with a community recently about there is this kind of challenge here, right? Is like you might only have 1 or 2 females going into an internship in manufacturing, right? But you also might have 1 or 2 going into an internship in construction and trades, right? You might have 1 or 2 going into an internship in IT, right? These ones, if you look at numbers and research, that are non-traditional pathways for women, right? And so, you know, again, not an answer by any means. I don't know if there's ever quite an answer to things, but like, where could there even be a space within the school that women who are doing internships in these non-traditional pathways have a space to share with each other, right? Like, you know, I used to have young women who would go into a finance place for an internship, and it would be a whole conference room full of generally white men in Patagonia vests and button-up shirts, right? And it's like, here's these 2 young women, typically 2 young women of color, who are like, well, all right, you know. And I remember one of them was like, I got this. The other one was like, I got to get out of here. But how could we like think about a space where even women pursuing non-traditional paths, right, are coming together because they might be the only one in their cohort of that internship? I don't know. It was a thought that was bubbling up, but. Well, I appreciate you all so much again for sharing and for taking the time too to listen to the young women, both at the high school and the college phase. I'm also thinking about what you shared, Janice, where like the women who were interested in college didn't really do any courses in high school. They just found the interest in college. And it's like, we could really look at that kind of blur area there too, as we're talking more and more about what is the blur between like high school to college, right? And if they're in there to the point too, I think you were sharing, Heather, right? They really liked being in that industrial area, that hands-on space. They found joy in that. But then their idea of post-secondary was like sitting in a classroom, lecture style, writing papers, right? It's like, so how do we, again, really unpack like this joy you feel? Like you will get a post-secondary credential and still experience that joy, because you have to keep doing that hands-on stuff to be successful and earn those credentials.
I think that's been a struggle too, even with our high school partners, that mindset of, oh, the industrial arts or the pathways after high school, you can just go to work, you can just go into industry and you're fine. And there's space for that. And absolutely, that's true too. But don't close that thought off of, what can I continue to do? How can I grow? This is not a dead end field. This isn't just a, show up and start working type thing. You can do all of these things. And really, if you can find an industry partner that will help you pay for college, if you have that idea of post-secondary and, hey, I want to pursue this, advocate for yourself that once you're hired on as an industry partner, hey, I want to go back and I want to make my skill better. I want to get better at this. I want to be a valuable employee to you. But that frame of mind, that thought of, if I'm taking an industrial arts course, I'm just going to head into the workforce right away. And I don't want to do that. And it's like, don't sell yourself short. Don't stop learning. Don't stop being a learner. You'll grow and do so much more. So yeah, that breaking that stereotype, even in our administrators' minds, or even in some of our CTE teachers that, are gentlemen that have worked in the field, and that's how they got there. And that's what they did. They went to school, they went to industry, and they're back. That was their path. That was their journey. And that doesn't still have to be that same path and journey.
Agreed. And very important point there about, like, don't close the thought, right? A young person might still decide to go start working right away, but like, how do they have all the information, right? They're making an informed decision. Here's all the information. Here's all the ways. Here's how to get into that opportunity, right? And here's the money you'll make. And here could be the difference in that money too, based on your post-secondary credentials, right? And you want to think about, what kind of style of life do you want? Like, well, here's the different wages that are offered to you earning those. So just appreciate you all again. And if you all have additional questions, please feel free to put those in the chat. I'm going to my screen up here in just a moment. But also too, if you want to learn more about empathy interviews and kind of what that process looks like and resources for that, very happy to share that as well. And I can include a resource too in the iWin follow-up, just as an overview of what the empathy interview process looks like and some guidance for that.
It was definitely worth the time. I would encourage you, if you're in a high school or even a post-secondary institution. I know a few of our partners were like, oh, another thing to do. But then after we had the conversation, after we did it, it was very worth the time and the conversation.
Absolutely. And yes, I see the chat. I will definitely put in the follow-up kind of an overview thing there. It's one thing I was thinking about. I should have linked in here, but there's always more and more you can keep sharing. And all right, but it does help guide, like to Heather's point there, like some people who are like, oh, I don't know about this, like it creates a guide, it creates language, it creates consistency, so that we all have our own biases, like inevitably, but it helps create more of a structure, right? So that the questions and the kind of the space they're creating is really lifting up the voice of that person you're talking to. But I'm going to turn over here to Danya to talk about our toolkit and share that with you all as well.
Hi, everybody. Yes, my name is Danya. I'm a fellow at EdSystems right now, and I've recently been working on a new resource for supporting young women in manufacturing. To be able to put together this resource, we've met with instructors in manufacturing at the high school level, folks that support women in manufacturing at organization levels, and women that work in manufacturing organizations as well. And essentially, we've come up with this toolkit that I've left the link for in the chat, as well as a feedback form for it, that goes through best practices, talks about general best practices, a lot of things that Heather, Janice, and Angela really spoke to as well, like making sure that women are seeing themselves on these site visits, making sure that they get the chance to do hands-on work, ensuring that they know that this is a space for them, the importance of starting early, and we have best practices for actually being able to implement some of these ideas throughout the continuum as well. So there's information about how to get folks involved with at the career exploration level, at the awareness level, in their CDEs and team-based challenges. And there's resources as well to make it as seamless as possible for those that are implementing it. And so we're currently incorporating feedback from more communities. So we'd love for y'all to take a look at this draft of the toolkit that I've left here in the chat, and to leave any feedback if you'd like. And something we're specifically still looking for is examples to be able to provide for, because one of the hardest things that is being able to provide good representative examples of women in manufacturing, even through video. If you can't get to a site tour, we've been really encouraging folks to show videos at the early level and start piquing that interest if they can't get to on a site tour. And so if y'all have good resources to share with us that you'd like for us to share out as well, and to continue to uplift the community that's trying to support young women, we'd love for you to leave that on that feedback form as well.
Yeah, it's a really exciting resource to put out there. It's, not exhaustive, right? It's not all the different ways and all the things you could do, but it really captures a lot of the wonderful ways that communities are thinking about supporting young women and having those successes and challenges in it. And we just want to continue to add to it, right? Like no conversation is ever done. Like we figured it out, like here's how you support young women, right? But we do have a great collection here, and Danya's just been incredible talking to communities and stakeholders, like actual women, right, in manufacturing, to get their thoughts. This isn't just like Danya being like, this is a good idea. So I really would, even as a woman though, right, she's very intelligent, but would love though too, if you all have that feedback, have those resources, just really want to make sure this is supporting you all, but excited to have this out there in the world. All right, some kind of brief next steps here for you all. So in case you missed it, we recently hosted an IWIN session on regional team-based challenges. There was information about those in the education pathway, the health sciences, and the manufacturing pathway. So there's a link to the event page there that has the recording and presentation. Tomorrow, we have another meeting of a policy working group through the Illinois Success Network that is really digging in on transportation for work-based learning. So would really encourage you, if that's a topic that you have questions about, things you want to flag up as we're thinking about policy recommendations, right? Ways that you have addressed transportation barriers for work-based learning. Please register. Would love to have you join us for that conversation tomorrow. That's at 11 o'clock. And then also for fall 2023, this is our final session of IWIN for the school year. We've hosted some in the summer before, but I think we maybe get like 2 people to register. Summer is a tricky time. And so we're going to spend the summer really planning and being intentional for fall. And so would love, if you're interested in sharing about something, if you've, been to these different IWINs, you're thinking about something that's really innovative that you would like to put out and share broadly across the state, please let me know that. But also if there's topics you would like to see, I know there was an interest at a site or at a recent IWIN about engaging more in what is a micro internship, what do those look like? And so we'll definitely be exploring those. But if there's things that you would like to share or things that you would like to see, please go ahead and drop those in the chat now, or even feel free to email me directly, as you might need to chat back with your team or do some thinking on what that is. But otherwise, I'll stay here. If there's any questions or additional conversations folks want to have, we have a few moments. Otherwise, you get about 5 minutes back here. But thank you. My contact information I was trying to say is in there. But as always, so wonderful to gather with you all. And thank you again to Heather and Janice. I think Angie had to drop off, but just very much appreciate you all.